Takero Shimazaki is a director of TSA, which was founded under a different name in 1996. So he's been at it for quite some time. Takero has taught at the AA, Cardiff, and Cambridge. He established TSA Forum in 2006, which is an independent school that is operated by his practice. I asked Takero if he would present a lecture after I heard him interviewed by Matthew Blunderfield on the Scaffold podcast, where he spoke about his teaching practice and the limitations of architecture and showed that he has an interest in engaging with as found conditions, all of which sounded really intriguing and germane to what we're talking about this semester. So I'm very delighted to hand over to Takero.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to try and talk in 45 minutes. I have 6 projects to go through, but the talk is really about this ideas that I think about when we've been working on projects. And um, I've kind of titled this lecture enough already. Uh, I can't move. Why is that? But it's really about a search for architecture in the times that we live in. Um, we've gone through, a very varying, ever-changing economical and political background over since 1996 when we've started our practice. I remember the harsh experience of Lehman shock in 2008. Um, and rapid kind of climate change since. And we sort of, with all these background, I think we're really focused on what kind of architecture can we do working with existing things as much as possible. So I've um, framed this talk. Uh, First of all, I'll go through the topics that I think about as intro. These are based on brief titles uh, for my diploma students at London Met, where I've been teaching since 2016. These are the topics that we've kind of dealt with over the last 10 years or so with my students. And I thought I would frame our own work at TSA under these headings. Um, so, enough already really is about observation. And it's about talking about observing as already a design, um, I suppose, process or design development by looking at things that you have already very carefully. You're kind of designing half of the project. Um, the other thing is that I think that with the title enough already, it's not to say that it's not that I'm angry or fed up. It's more that we do have enough of building stocks and things that we can already work with. And it's kind of a saying that glass is half full. I like to believe that we live in the world of abundance. Um, we've worked like many practices since 1996 on small projects, refurbishments, extensions, and this has already always been like that. You know, we've always worked with existing things. It's not just a recent thing. So these are topics that we've been thinking about, and I'll just discuss them in more detail. But formal correction was something that came from a brief that we set up in 2016 with my core tutor at the time, Sama Islam of Material Cultures. Um, we began by looking at Palladio. I wanted to kind of go back in history and look at what these architects were doing. But we focused on the idea that this Basilica Palladiana was in essence a reuse. So it's a project where Palladio kind of made this new loggia around the former Gothic building. Um, And you can see here in these diagrams that the new loggia, which is in the perimeter, the column rhythm, actually works ever so slightly to adapt to the how do you say, unevenness of the existing situation. So you can see that this original building is slightly, not perfectly symmetrical nor proportioned. And Palladio has this amazing skill to adjust that, but actually formally correct, so that the end product is how do you say, has a more of an order. And we found that very, very interesting as a process. And we asked our students to look at Palladio's idealized plans and drawings from his Quattro Libri book. And then we went to Vicenza and surveyed the buildings that were actually built and overlapped those two drawings just to see what were the changes from the idealized diagrams and drawings to the reality. We found out a really interesting idea in practice as well. This is a project I won't talk about today, but one kind of an ordinary suburban house in Surrey that we, shall we say, formally corrected by adding this loggia when the client asked us to extend into the garden. So these are the sort of things and the sort of the discrepancy that occurs with the existing openings and the new opening was something that's very interesting for me. Translations. So when I started teaching at London Met, I was surrounded by some amazing architects like Peter St. John, Tony Fretton, and often I noticed that they refer to obviously other buildings and other precedents. And for me, this idea of translation really began from my time at Alison and Peter Smithson's office round about 2000. After I set up my own practice, I had an opportunity to work for Peter uh, 2 days a week, just sort of helping him with this project called Hexenhaus, which is one of the Smithson's last projects where they developed this kind of ordinary house in Germany and added a porch, a bridge, a wine drinking room, um, etc. These kind of extended porches over the span of about 25 years. I don't think the project's still finished, but this idea of renewing with the client over a long period of time was a very big influence on our practice. That you can do quite little, but accumulate ideas over years. And then also at a more personal level, this is the client's business card, but the way even the client at Hexen House worked has influenced what we do in the practice daily and influenced our things like our Christmas cards. This is a card received from Axel with Smithson's drawing of Hexen House um, and the business card and their cats, both Smithson's and Axel's cats appearing in the cards. So enough already. I am, as I said, interested in the idea of abundance and the fact that we already have a lot of existing, richness. And we ask students every year to start with surveys, and we draw existing through observation drawings. We really kind of look at what's there already. That moment in time is very important. Um, Lina Bobardi called it historical present. So everything that exists in front of you, whether it's historical or contemporary, I think it's all the same. It exists presently. So we take that really seriously and we record what's present in front of us. Um, and we think that everything is, um, yeah, it's from the same era in a way. Um, and this was an exhibition that we did in that year with my diploma unit in Truman's Brewery area, Brick Lane, with Assemble. Um, showcasing students' work. This is another year, but I did a writing about students' model making for Stoa magazine from Naples. Um, and this was a work by the students recording every aspect of fragments of existing buildings in Stoke-on-Trent. And this notion of making existing things through models became a sort of a habit in our unit. And this is Ollie Brenner in the year of Enough Already, making this existing model on the left and how it became his part of his proposal. But this is already, to me, architecture. The making of the existing is already a proposal. Lightness and weight is another important topic for us, and we studied it through Robert Venturi's book, Complexity and Contradictions, and just looking at this kind of idea of how can you make something quite sort of weighty out of light materials. So our interest was about this kind of materiality. Again, when we went to visit Palladio's work, we noticed that sort of this kind of timber construction appearing through this decay and this kind of aim of making something quite light make appear quite heavy with this stucco render to appear like stone was already at play at Palladio's time. And I kind of very much enjoyed this idea when thinking about our own projects, often with very tight budget. So I'll show you later, but this is about that notion in our Curzon Camden project, which is essentially just sort of render and lightweight steel construction. Yohaku and Ma was another brief, which is really about the space between. It's about this kind of idea that in, you know, times of scarcity, lack of resource, low budget projects, where can we make architecture? And I think architecture can exist in how we space things, how we make distances between things. Those things can create tension and, in a way, beauty. And this kind of comes from this idea of Ma in Japanese traditional architecture, that actually a lot of Japanese architecture comes from this idea of um, spacing and distancing of columns and tatami mats as living spaces. And those kind of ideas were utilized for us in Niwa House, which is a house I'll show you later. But this idea that column spacing and user plan layout spacing became very key. And then this notion of tolerance, I think we architects talk about tolerance all the time about when materials come to meet, but maybe there's not much discussion about how architects can be tolerant to existing situations and really kind of work with existing things. I mean, working with existing things means you have to be really tolerant. You have to really work with what's already there. You have to change your stance. You have to kind of be really accommodating. So these are sort of some students work on collaging, trying to see solutions in the existing, um, and really working with materials that are as found and from Skip in a way. This is a project by Ryan Spear in our unit, working with as found materials to make this model for this community center in Sutton. And I kind of work like that all the time, where these kind of insertions on a new facade is on an existing facade, sorry, is really about this struggle about tolerance. And then finally, we're working this year with my group of students about this notion of what goes up, what is permanent, what is impermanent, and really kind of we're asking our group of students, nothing is really permanent, everything is impermanent. But, you know, if we start from that notion that everything is impermanent, how do you think about architecture? How do you think about what you build? How do you think about the reuse of your own work later on in 50 years' time, 100 years' time? What makes that change the way you think about maintenance? And we're sort of giving them examples of, you know, what was perceived as permanence or different ways of permanence. Issei Shrine in Japan is thought of as permanent in a different notion of maintenance every 25 years, and rebuild every 25 years. But is that really sustainable as well, is a question. Is the shrine is obviously very special with surrounding forestry, etc. So those are questions we're asking our students, and I think we think about that quite seriously in our practice too. This is a plan of newer house, which I talk later. And this is an elevation of the Yard Theatre, which is a reuse of existing theatre, where we're building a new additional part. So just some projects. I think I won't try to explain or describe the projects with the time we have, but I wanted to show just really just as a almost like slides, those notions that I just talked about in my introduction, how they may have or they may have materialized or they have been discussed in these projects, in these six projects. Five reuse projects, one kind of new project, but I would categorize them all as working with existing things. So Leicester Print Workshop is a project from 2016. The art Leicester Art Printworks art facilities inherited this glass warehouse in the middle of the arts quarter by the council. And we started from kind of working with this existing building and what can we do with it. The budget was 450,000 only pounds. So that's very, very tight budget. And it became for us about how do we really maximize these existing features and the character. By stripping a little bit, we started to kind of get deeper into the character of the existing, which we thought was really fundamental to the future of this building. And we decided that everything we add would be just white, and then that you are able to really have this kind of glimpses of the existing from the cityscape as well. And we brought in this new order or new playfulness to the facade, um, reusing the brickwork to close off some of the openings from the existing. So if we make an opening, we use the same brick to close off some of the openings and so on. These are the sort of sketches from the from early on, but kind of, we sort of developed that into the final scheme. And the plans are very simple. You can see that all these partitions are new, but dividing the co-working studio space with back of house, dark rooms, washrooms, etc., with educational facility in the middle, and a small kind of gallery space to the front of house. Again, this is a really admirable institution that's kind of, really kind of looked after by themselves, by the artists, and we were really fortunate to work with them. The client body was Soraya Smithson was on the board of sorry, member of the board, who is the daughter artist of Alison and Peter. So we really enjoyed the project, creating this almost like a reused kind of new body in the um, city kind of quarter of these sort of former warehouses, and we quite enjoy the fact that it's acknowledging the context, but it's clearly slightly different. And we enjoyed that sort of juxtaposition, but it is really a very frugal, humble project of reuse with limited budget. And what we really enjoyed is how the artists keep on developing the site. I mean, I don't have pictures, but the garden is now fully developed outside by them. They added like a bookstore inside, etc. This is a gallery space. And they, once the artists have started to occupy it, the space has really become alive. And this kind of relationship with existing surroundings and the spaces inside. And really how the former warehouse is always visible and always present, cutting through these kind of partition spaces um, with the former beams and structural cranes, etc. And so you kind of really live with the historical present. Um, Lucy Phillips, the director of the foundation, unfortunately passed away suddenly, and she continues to leave her legacy through this Lucy Phillips Arts Fund. Curzon Camden is another project which is about working underneath the existing railway viaduct. The developers had already started this development, so a lot of these kind of glazing, curtain walling was part of existing. So we kind of worked with the master plan by the developer architects, but then kind of remodeled all the other infills. But it's essentially a new cinema for Curzon Cinema with five very small, intimate screens and the bar space and a little coffee shop. We, enjoyed thinking about what kind of architectural ideas that can be possible with, again, quite a limited budget with light touch. So this kind of idea of lightness and weight became fundamental in our approach. So I won't go into too much detail, but the blue is what we've added, and we kind of work with the existing black kind of background, and we utilize as much as possible existing, even the new insertions by the developer to really think about what kind of atmosphere we can recreate. And this is an image from Adolf Loos's American Bar in Vienna. And sort of those kind of inspirations were fundamental to us, and translating it into this kind of industrial materials and plywood that's been painted. So everything is like a mix of render. These vertical columns are just a render columns, not even touching the ground. And then this is just really reusing the existing curtain walling that the developer left there. Um, and this is the bar, cinema entrance inside of one of the bars with all the sort of painted plywood. This is as found beam that was already there, as well as this glazing. This plywood ceiling was as found. We repainted it, slightly different color. Um, yeah, and this is sort of creating this kind of cozy bar with mirroring inspired by Adolf Loos. And these are the auditoriums. Again, very small space, but try to recreate a sense of grandeur in the ceiling with fabric. So it's really looking kind of at opportunities for architectural interventions, I suppose, in every little square inch, maximizing these existing things into a new language. This is an evening view, so you can see the existing leftover plywood by the developer that we reused. Royal Academy of Dance is a ballet school we completed in 2022. We worked through COVID, so a lot of work that was done here was through Zoom and online. But again, it's another form of reuse in the sense that we worked. I won't go into the details, but for a very strange procurement option where the developer and the client had a direct relationship. And we worked for our client as a design advisors, but the developers were building this kind of housing scheme above our site. And we had to kind of work with as found in this kind of new development, but as found in a sense that we had to work with the what the developers were proposing for the housing units above, and these are the structures holding that up to create this new dance school, ballet school. This is the plan. So we had the whole of the ground floor and a little bit of the first floor to the right for offices, but we couldn't also touch the elevations either because that was part of the main developer's plans for the housing. The only thing we could touch, which I'll show you, is this canopy to the front of the school building. But this is the entrance, and then we have seven dance studios, one big performance space, library space, cafe space, shop space, office, lecture rooms, etc. So it's a big city kind of inside a new developed city. And I was very much interested in this idea of streets and plaza to make some kind of notion of a cityscape inside this essentially an interiorized, very deep plan. Um, and so we created this notion of like a space for pausing, space to meet, interact, as well as the streets to take you between the spaces. The developer plan that we inherited was literally rooms of corridors. And we wanted to kind of move away from that by expanding, shrinking some of these streets, making more sense of these nodes, so spaces that we can make um, areas to meet for students and teachers to meet. And we looked at, places like this kind of Barcelona Gothic quarter, where you kind of go through these kind of meandering streets and pop out into these city squares. So it was about how do we bring some architecture into this very corporate developer housing scheme and site. Um, and we really fought quite hard about even just to sort of introduce our own canopy for the school, inserted into this kind of scheme that's above us. Um, and working with the existing columns. So we made most of those columns that we as found, and then used them as the main kind of key features that we worked around to form spaces. So you could see here the column became yeah a node for like a center point for these kind of plazas to occur. And then what we added with these kind of plywood columns and pillars, framing our new windows for student rooms and dance studios, and these kind of furniture, as well as the flooring and etc. But we kept everything quite simple. Again, and a budget was really stretched. A lot of things that we worked on to make architecture was through plywood, stained plywood and plasterboard. But at the same time, we had to respect the history of Royal Academy of Dance. It's a royal institution, so it's a classical tradition we worked with. So we kept the design very simple, but um, try to introduce this notion of architectural notions of pillars and um, verticality, horizontality in every detail that we could find. This is a existing window. By existing, I mean the developer made window that we worked around in the studio space, uh, performance space, and dancers occupying these spaces eventually, which was very, very nice to see, utilizing our details around windows and pillars. Um, it's quite sort of a different type of reuse. This is a reuse of a high street, abandoned high street warehouse. High streets, I don't know about Australia, but in the UK, this kind of shopping high streets are in decay, and this kind of commercial outlets struggle on high streets. This was one former BHS store, massive store building on Sutton High Street. Collaborating with a young practice, Samuel Chisholm Studio, we converted this building into a workspace. And it's connected through a shopping center entrance like this. And inside, there's this kind of massive warehouse, abandoned warehouse, um, with, I mean, really beautiful spaces actually, that we worked with. Tried to make community workspace, wellness space, town hall, nursery, and so on in this abandoned building. And so on that front facade that you saw, we kept all the existing pillars and frames, but tried to think about like adding to the rooftop, re-emphasizing the verticality of the space and bringing more light into the frontage. And then in the rear, in the deeper plan, we thought about how do we insert new architectural language, but also how do we tie these kind of new additions into this, what is a very, very large plot. I show you in the plans shortly. But it's really about sort of being tolerant, working with existing things, existing conditions, and actually trying to bring our own language into the setting. So you can see that the plan that you saw of the high street is this end, and this is the back trolley way, but it's a very, very deep plan. And all the red lines are what we've added. So this is that BHS logo from coming in from the shopping center, which acted as our entrance. And then you go up these kind of big stairs, and we created this new town hall auditorium, new restaurant, and then this made a cut into the existing warehouse to connect the different floors from there to go up to the third floor. And then there's a sort of a garden and a nursery space. And then a big co-working space on the third floor plan. And then the fourth floor co-working space. And then the rooftop landscape. It's very hard to explain, but you can see in the section here, it's like creating a new city inside this warehouse, with what you saw at the beginning, that kind of high street facade being very just a fragment of what's behind. So it's this very large, um, almost like a landscape, and behind the facade. And we really enjoyed inserting this kind of new narrative of rhythm and proportion, to create this new community center in Sutton, which is a sort of I mean, Sutton High Street is fairly active compared to other high streets, but it's really changing the place, and it's very popular. Um, and you see people sort of hanging around in these spaces, and you can see in these kind of cross sections as well what we've inserted against what's existing. We try to do as little as possible with this notion of enough already, maximizing the existing. What we've inserted, we wanted to form a sort of a language that formalized as a backdrop. But so like here, you can see the insertion of an atrium into an existing structure that we opened up, or we've reused every brickwork that we were taking away that were reusable to create a new reception desk. And then this is the new facade, that sort of has these kind of vertical open. We just exposed this slab that was in between floor space, and then maximize these kind of heights through these new windows, left H&M as it was. And then internally, you see these kind of new insertions into the existing structure. You can see this is one of the key things that we did in one of the workspaces, to create a new atrium, new void next to the um, uh, uh, courtyard space on the right. This is the town hall where the clients basically gathered secondhand furniture and equipment, and essentially we just literally made a shell for them with plasterboard and exposed brickwork and acoustic carpet. This is a courtyard that with that infill of the new curtain wall that you kind of clearly see the existing structure, and then various courtyards across the development, um, where we are retaining some sort of sense of order and architectural language. But the rest is really just this kind of exposed, yeah, existing building. And this reception desk that I showed you, rear facade. So the existing building is already really great. We just changed this kind of the glazing at the back for workspace, and there's a sort of a little entrance at the back as well. And then this is how it's used during the summer on the rooftop. Um, just two more projects. Niwa House is a project that we finished in 2024. It's a new house project. But again, we start always from existing. This is for a wheelchair user, so fully accessible horizontal site that they were looking for a plot to build a new house in. We visited the existing site with our clients just at the start of COVID, and really enjoyed observing and looking at the site. This is the plot in the rear of this back of the seven terrace houses. We started by drawing the existing quite carefully. As you can see, this is the sketch of the house, horizontal house, with this kind of fully connected spaces with courtyards. And then setting up this kind of a lightweight pavilion, basically. How can we do as little as possible on this site by inserting a light, almost like a traditional Japanese architecture. Client is half Japanese. And we sort of started working with this idea of this kind of this sense of 1.5 meter grid to be comfortable for a wheelchair user. This is a section. You can see the sort of the lightness of the addition. We worked with Webb Yates, structural engineer, to develop this hybrid construction of stone and glulam timber to create this rigid structure. But essentially, it's an open pavilion with this stone floor, stone ceiling to create thermal mass. And we were very conscious about this sort of global warming and how to keep thermal mass so that it's very um, cool in the summer with natural ventilation, and then warm in the winter. So no air conditioning apart from in this kind of gym space in the um, lower ground. And we were really focusing on creating this Engawa-like space, inside outside space, various translations from Sphere Fan to Ryue Nishizawa of Sana, Mies, of course, to create this kind of pavilion-like structure. This is during site. We really enjoy this lightweight frame going up to create this building of lightness and heaviness. Um, and these are photographs by Felix Koch from 6A Architects, making this kind of incredible atmospheric photos of the site process. This is the stone sort of tiles going in, so modular of 750, that creates this 1.5 meter grid, which acts as a thermal buffer, but this is just literally resting on top of the glulam beams, sandwiched by this kind of perimeter, again, glulam beams to hold it in place to form this decking, and it supports the grass roof on top, the green roof on top. I won't really explain these photographs, but these are sort of pre-occupation photographs, again by Felix, just really kind of focusing on the structure. and the openness and connection to the garden and the sky. This is one of my favorite photographs. As you go down to lower ground, you really see the sort of the structures forming the architecture. Nothing much more other than the garden, interior, this level access, um, this kind of fabric that closes off to create this kind of um, sort of diffuse light. Structures just almost effortlessly just sitting on top of each other and very present in the space. This is post-occupation and this changing light throughout the day, throughout the season. Lower ground spaces don't feel like basements. With garden, worked with Rich Brothers. Um, and you can see that this house is really designed for accessibility, but without showing that. This is the -1 level, which has got quite different character. So you've got his kind of sink area, her sink area, where wheelchairs can kind of dock in, and then this kind of fully accessible bathroom, and one of the children's rooms. And they invited me to visit the cherry blossom viewing last spring, and that was just a really, really beautiful moment when the house was being used inside and out, and all of this garden growing. Final project, just very quickly, on this notion of what goes up. The Yard Theatre is a theatre that was built for £9,000 about 13 years ago, and it's been operating in Hackney Wick, which is near the Olympic Park and the new V&A, etc. It's just around here by the canal in Hackney Wick. And it's really a admirable project where the artistic director and practice architecture develop self-build and lasted all of this time. Very iconic theatre, a bar space where this kind of existing theatre was projecting out into the bar space. And again, this is a project that is about building a new wing to this theatre, new kind of auditorium, retaining as much of the existing as possible. So we began by really analyzing the existing and drawing. This is a kind of a collage drawing, but drawing the existing as carefully as possible, and this time in color. And this is just to explain the new auditorium being added. The bar is reconfigured, new toilet, and then there's a first floor as well. I won't explain too much, but it's again about creating this new, almost architectural icon through reuse. But this thinking about what goes up, what mass do we build? These are some of my sketches, just really contemplating and sort of discussing with clients through these drawings, what is the right thing to do. The tower, incidentally, is for natural ventilation. And then the front facade is made of K brick, which is waste brick, which is made from all the construction waste from other sites. So the building is essentially really kind of simply constructed, but using all of these sustainability methods. These are the planning drawings, and we are on site now. So this is the colorful K brick, waste brick, and then this is the natural ventilation tower, which also acts as a signage. So natural air is constantly moving through the existing building, and we created this new facade with K brick waste brick to form that character to the open plaza in Queen's Yard, like this. So this kind of becomes a new icon for the area. This is the interior of the bar. And then this is the shot from the street as on site currently. with the ventilation tower going up. And this is a view from the platform at Hackneywick Station as you approach from Stratford. This is what you get. And that is my favorite final slide. Thank you.
So I can see that we've got a raised hand. So Julia's just going to walk over and ask you her question directly while I fiddle around with the gadgets.
Thanks very much. That was a really interesting lecture, beautiful body of work, and very thought-provoking. I had a question kind of about your idea of the historical present. And I think the tendency when working with historical buildings to want to reinstate and to want to sort of, I guess this like purist notion of bringing it back to its original form, and kind of a reluctance to acknowledge or appreciate how a building may have been adapted over time to suit the user's needs, and I think that kind of human engagement with it. So I was wondering kind of what your take on that was in terms of how that is often approached, which seems kind of quite different to your approach, which is often to kind of engage with that a little bit more.
Yes, that's very interesting. So over the last, 10, 15 years, we sort of come to work a lot with historical buildings, but with these no different ideas such as conservation, restoration, um, and so on, that, as you say. And I think working with a conservation architect, they once taught us in a way that conservation is actually about series of interventions over the years. So to a trained eye, it's, you should be able to understand what was kind of added roughly when, even in historical kind of restoration or conservation projects. And I found that really, really interesting. And, the longer I practice, the more I get interested in the idea of conservation and restoration. But because we also have ability to adapt them and ability to add to them. Um, and almost, as you say, kind of take it to today's needs and not just sort of blindly restore things. But I do also enjoy idea of restoring things in the contemporary ways. Um, but it's never, in my view, restored in an original state, because obviously we have moved on. We live in, we live sort of 100 years later than when something was built. So it's very ambiguous and it's very vague, but I find that really, really interesting. And nothing is ever scientific. And yeah, challenging restoration or working with restoration, I find extremely interesting and helpful. And this notion of conservation, I once thought that it was really just to conserve as it was. But actually, no, when, discussing with conservation architects and historians, that's not actually the case. It's about sort of acknowledging what you're adding or what you're doing at that particular time, if that makes sense at all.
Thank you.
I think we've got a second question here. And just before Emily steps up to the microphone, if anyone online wants to ask a question, please put it in the Q&A and I will relay it to Takero.
Hi, Takero. I had a question about your process in kind of thinking about enough already or kind of working with existing things. So the students, we're looking at, I guess, a tabular planner approach. And you touched on, observations and the importance of being able to make those observations and then, I guess, like you're saying, make a formal correction. And I just wondered, if you could just talk to us and indulge us a little bit more about your process.
And can I just add to that, Takero, as well, because I think it's really interesting for us. Is there anything about the way in which you observe buildings or record buildings before you start designing that you think is particular to your practice? I mean, does your team measure the buildings yourselves, or do you commission a surveyor to measure the buildings and create, as existing drawings, or are there other techniques that you're applying when you're working on these projects?
Yeah, thank you. Interesting question. I think yes, we in our practice we do both. So we do our own surveys. We visit early on quite a lot. We measure our own measurements, photographs, sketches, but then also get the measure survey company to do a 3D measure. Um, but I think also, yes, photographs and observing atmosphere is important. So, like in this yard project, we attempted to make a photo collage, actually inspired by one of my students from a few years ago who was very much into digital scanning, photographic scanning. So his survey, we did a lot in the unit previously, where we focused, as you saw maybe in earlier slides, about observing through line drawings. And we kind of believe that actually you can express everything through line, by drawing textures, different line weights, etc. But actually also this kind of scanning, photographic kind of surveying was also very, very interesting to us. So we use both now, but also we yes, we quite like the idea that Philip Crystal and Florian Bagel taught me once, that don't give a judgmental hierarchy too quickly to existing things. So maybe related to the last question as well, but whether it's a historical building that we're working on in the Palladium Manor in Lincolnshire, or whether it's the Yard project, which is this derelict warehouse, industrial warehouse, I we don't kind of put any difference. Or developer, built kind of 2 years old structure. We take everything in the same way. And this is kind of one of the things that we find really exciting about Gio Ponti and Lina Bobadi's notion of historical present. I think Lina Bobadi was basically trying to say that everything that you come across, you take good care. You take good observational care. So of course you have to give yourself a hierarchy because you can't survey absolutely everything. So through drawing, I think you make those decisions of choosing and as you said in your question, indulging on which aspect of existing you enjoy more. And I think it's okay to be subjective as well as getting a more how do you say, in-depth research from historical consultants, which actually with whom we work with quite often in buildings. So we rely on historical consultants' report on narrative and stories of the past, why that door was there, why that was removed, which owners came in and changed that, and in 1850, etc. So we value those things as well as we value what's in front of you, a bit more subjective, something that's more direct, if that makes sense.
I've got a follow-up question, maybe just on you spoke a bit about care, and I had a question around value. Sometimes these interventions are quite small, and I thought it'd be interesting to talk about though the power of kind of small interventions, when we're working with existing building stock. Often maybe approach from a client is, the demolish and start again, but I think there's value in, like you're saying, formal corrections or kind of smaller interventions.
Yes, that's a really interesting topic for me. I think when I talk about enough already, um, I'm thinking about a lot of things about what's enough. Um, Not just in terms of architectural design, but also professionally, in practice. What is enough? What do we do that's enough, especially in today's world where, it's so fluctuating, so unpredictable. And we sort of quite often, especially on residential projects, we tell our clients to do less, or we kind of sometimes show up, meeting with new clients and say, well, actually, you don't need to do much. And then they look very disappointed. But the sort of starting a conversation from there is very interesting. It used to be the other way around when I was younger and, um, starting out practice. I was kind of jealous of countries like Japan where they were building lots of new things, hoping to go back and practice there. And I had to learn slightly harder way, actually, working in London with a lot of constraints. But after 20 years or so, you start to realize actually this is a really, really interesting training and really interesting way to work where, there's lots of value in what had gone before. There's sort of cultural development and tradition and continuity, and you're part of a long, long kind of time span. You're only a sort of a small part of a bigger time span, and you're adding what you can today, but then somebody else might come and add something else or undo something or take away something. So yeah, I think about this notion of what's enough quite regularly. And how many projects do we do? How many people do we need? Can we actually get away with doing less or doing small things? And small things are very satisfying. So what I used to think as a sort of I don't know how to say disadvantage, I suppose. When I started practice, there were lots of big companies doing big things, and big was good. And I think I'm very, very pleased or very content with sort of doing interventions, if that answers your question.
I think it does. And it's also a really lovely note to end on. So I will ask everyone to thank you again for an excellent talk, Takero.
Thank you so much for having me.